The elevator dropped. Not far, just a few feet, all at once, with a screech of metal that made both of them grab for the walls. Then it stopped. Dead. The lights flickered, went out, came back dim and red. Somewhere above them, a cable groaned. A man slammed his palm against the emergency button. Nothing. He hit it again. Still nothing. He pulled out his phone. No signal. 40 floors of steel and concrete between him and the world, and the little box they stood in had just become a trap. The woman beside him hadn't said a word. She was the one person in that whole building he was never supposed to be alone with. His name was Daniel Hayes, and the woman trapped in there with him signed his paychecks. What she would whisper before that hour was over, he never saw coming. Just stay with me. Let me back up an hour. Because to understand what happened in that elevator, you need to know the man standing in it. Daniel Hayes was 30 years old, and he was tired in the way only a single father knows. 2 years ago, he'd lost his wife. A sickness that came fast and took her faster and left him alone with a little girl named Lily and a stack of medical bills that still hadn't stopped arriving. He didn't talk about it at work. He just showed up, did his job, and went home to his daughter. He worked on the 22nd floor of the Coal Industries Tower, a mid-level analyst in a sea of mid-level analysts. The kind of job where if you vanished, it would take 3 days for anyone to notice your chair was empty. But it had health insurance. It had a steady paycheck. And for a man raising a little girl on his own, that paycheck was the only thing standing between his family and the edge. He could not afford to lose it. Not now. Not ever. He'd done the math 100 times. If he lost this job, he had maybe 2 months of savings before things got bad. Not uncomfortable. Bad. The kind of bad where a man has to explain to a 6-year-old why they're moving, why her room is gone, why daddy looks scared all the time. He'd promised his wife, at the very end, that he would take care of Lily, that he'd keep her safe and steady and happy. That promise was the engine that got him out of bed every morning and into that gray building full of people who didn't know his name. That night he'd stayed late. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. But Lily had a school recital the next morning, and Daniel had promised her. Promised that he'd be in the front row with his phone out, recording every second. So he stayed past 9, finishing 2 days of work in one night, just so he could take the morning off without anyone asking questions. In his breast pocket was a folded piece of paper, a drawing Lily had made him. 2 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun, and the words "Me and Daddy" in shaky crayon letters. He carried it everywhere. Now here's the thing you have to understand about Coal Industries. It was run by a woman named Vanessa Cole. And in that building, Vanessa Cole was less a person than a kind of weather. She was young, not yet 30, which made the older men on the board furious in a way they never said out loud. She was beautiful in a cold, untouchable way. And she was married to Adrian Cole, the only son of the man who built the company, an heir worth more money than most small countries. People were afraid of her. That was just a fact. She walked through the building, and conversations died. She stepped into a room, and everyone sat up straighter. The story went that she'd fire you for a typo, that she never smiled, that her husband had put her in the CEO chair, and she ruled it like ice. There was a story everyone told. A junior VP, the year before, had made a joke at her expense in a meeting, thinking he was being charming. By the end of that day, his office was empty. Nobody knew if it was even true. It didn't matter. True or not, it taught everyone the same lesson. You kept your distance from Vanessa Cole. You said, "Yes, Mrs. Cole," and of course, Mrs. Cole. And you got out of the room as fast as your legs would carry you. 300 people worked in that tower, and not one of them, as far as Daniel knew, had ever once asked her how her day was going. Daniel had seen her exactly twice in 3 years, both times from across a crowded floor. He had never spoken a single word to her. He never expected to. So when the elevator doors opened on the 22nd floor at 9:40 at night, and Vanessa Cole was standing inside it, alone, Daniel Hayes almost didn't get in. He should have waited for the next one. Every instinct told him to wait. You do not get into a small metal box alone with the woman who can end your career with one phone call. But she looked up at him, and there was something in her face he didn't expect. She looked exhausted. She looked, for half a second, like a regular person at the end of a very long day. And waiting for the next elevator would have been its own kind of insult, like saying out loud that he was afraid of her. So he stepped in. He nodded once, polite, and turned to face the doors the way you do. He pressed the button for the lobby. The doors slid shut. 4 floors. Neither of them said anything. The numbers ticked down. 18, 17, 16. Daniel stared straight ahead and counted the seconds until he could escape. Then, somewhere around the 15th floor, the elevator dropped. And everything changed. The drop was short. A few feet of free fall, then a bone-jarring stop that threw them both against the walls. The lights died, came back red and dim. And then the elevator just hung there, somewhere between the 15th and 14th floors, swaying a little on its cables. Daniel was the first to move. He hit the emergency button. Nothing. He hit it again and held it down. No voice came through the speaker. He pulled out his phone. No signal, this deep in the shaft. He worked his fingers into the gap in the doors and pulled. They didn't budge. He turned around. Vanessa hadn't moved from her spot by the panel. In the red light, she looked smaller somehow. Less like the woman who froze rooms, and more like anybody else stuck somewhere they didn't want to be. "You can stop trying," she said. "I've spent enough hours in this building to know that elevator isn't going anywhere until somebody upstairs notices the fault." She almost smiled. "Welcome to the most expensive waiting room in the city. They won't open. Maintenance runs a systems test at 10. If we're still stuck, they'll see it. Someone will come. And if they don't, then it's a long night." Daniel looked at his watch. 9:43. Almost 20 minutes until 10. He sat down slowly against the back wall, because standing at attention in front of his CEO for 20 minutes in a broken elevator felt absurd. After a moment, to his surprise, she did the same. She slid down the opposite wall until she was sitting across from him, knees drawn up, heels kicked off to the side. The most powerful woman in the building, sitting on the floor of a stuck elevator in a $5,000 suit. For a while they didn't talk. Then she said, out of nowhere, "You're not going to ask me for anything." "What?" "Everyone who gets 2 minutes alone with me asks me for something. A promotion, a budget, a favor. You've had me trapped in a box for 10 minutes, and you haven't asked for a thing." She tilted her head. "Why?" Daniel thought about it. "I guess I just want to get home to my daughter." Something shifted in her face. "You have a daughter." "Lily. She's 6. She's got a recital tomorrow." And before he could stop himself, he pulled the folded drawing out of his pocket and showed her. He didn't know why. It just felt like the natural thing to do. "She made me this." Vanessa took it. She looked at it for a long time, longer than a crayon drawing needed. And when she handed it back, her eyes were wet. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Something I have never said to a single person in this building?" "Okay. I haven't been asked a real question in 3 years. Not one. Everyone wants something from me, or they're afraid of me, or both. My own husband talks to me like I'm a line on a balance sheet." She turned the wedding ring on her finger around and around. A diamond the size of a tooth. "Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by 300 people every day and be completely, totally alone?" Daniel did, actually. Since his wife died, he'd felt it every single day. So he told her. He told her about the sickness, about the bills, about the nights he sat outside Lily's door just listening to her breathe, because the silence of the apartment scared him. He had never told anyone at work any of it. But there in that red-lit box, with a woman he was never supposed to speak to, it all came out. And Vanessa Cole told him her side. How she'd married Adrian at 23, dazzled by all of it. How the dazzle wore off and left a cage. How Adrian and his father had put her in the CEO chair not because they believed in her, but because she was easier to control than an outsider. How every decision she made was watched, second-guessed, overruled. How the car that drove her everywhere reported where she went. How the phone in her purse was company property, monitored. How she hadn't had one private conversation, a real one, in longer than she could remember. For a long moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. He was an analyst. He fixed spreadsheets. He had no business counseling the most powerful woman in the company on the inside of her own marriage. So he said the only true thing he had. "My wife used to say the loneliest place in the world isn't an empty room," he said. "It's standing next to someone who stopped looking at you." Vanessa went very still. How long were you married? 6 years. And she looked at you the whole time? Right up to the end. Even when she couldn't talk anymore. She'd just find my eyes across the room and hold on. Vanessa was quiet for a while. Then she said, almost too soft to hear, I would give every dollar Adrian has for one person to look at me like that. Just once. Just to know I'm still a person and not a piece of furniture they're all afraid of. They built me a beautiful life, she said. And they forgot to leave a door. She asked him about Lily. The real questions, the ones people forget to ask. What was she like? What made her laugh? What she wanted to be when she grew up. And Daniel found himself talking about his daughter to a near stranger on the floor of a broken elevator, grinning like an idiot, because nobody ever asked. Vanessa listened like it was the most interesting thing she'd heard in years. Maybe it was. Then she told him about the version of herself that existed before the Coles. A girl from a nothing town who'd put herself through school on scholarships and stubbornness, who once believed she was going to change the world. I don't know where she went, Vanessa said. I've been looking for her for years. Maybe she's still in there, Daniel said. Cage things don't die. They just go quiet. They talked for what felt like minutes, but was almost a full hour. And somewhere in there, something happened that neither of them planned. Two lonely people, trapped, stopped performing. She laughed at something he said, a real laugh, and pressed her hand over her mouth like she'd forgotten she was allowed. He saw her. Not the CEO, just her. And she saw him. Then, at 4 minutes past 10, the elevator shuttered. The lights snapped back to full. The cables hummed. With a lurch, the box began to move, smooth and ordinary, down toward the lobby. 14, 13, 12. Just like that, it was over. The spell broke. Vanessa scrambled to her feet, slipped her heels back on, smoothed her suit. By the time they passed the 10th floor, she was the CEO again. Spine straight, face composed, like the last hour had never happened. Daniel stood too, folded the drawing back into his pocket, and told himself the same thing she was telling herself. It was nothing. A strange night. Tomorrow they would go back to being a CEO and an analyst who had never met. The numbers counted down. 3, 2, 1. The doors opened on the bright, empty lobby. And that's when she grabbed his arm. Her hand closed around his forearm. Tight. And she leaned in close. And the woman everyone in that building was afraid of begged a man she barely knew for one thing. He froze. Mrs. Cole. One thing, she whispered. Fast and quiet. Her eyes flicking to the security camera in the corner of the lobby. I'm asking you for one thing. Once a week, you stay late. You take this elevator at 9:40. And you talk to me. 10 minutes. Like tonight. Like I'm a person. Her grip tightened. I'm not asking for anything else. I swear to you. Nothing else. I just need 10 minutes a week where I'm real. Please. And there it was. Not a proposition. Not a scheme. The most powerful woman in the building, begging a stranger for 10 honest minutes. Because that was the one thing all her money could not buy. Daniel should have said no. Every smart part of him screamed to say no. Instead, he looked at this drowning woman, and he thought about his own empty apartment, and he heard himself say, okay. She let go of his arm. The CEO mask slid back down over her face. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, she said, loud and flat, for the camera. And she walked out across the lobby, heels clicking, and slid into the black town car waiting at the curb. The car that watched where she went. Now, if you've ever been the only one who saw the real person behind somebody everyone else got completely wrong. If you've ever been handed something fragile that was never supposed to be handed to you, then you already feel where this is going, and you understand why Daniel said yes. If you're still with me, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button, because this is where a quiet kindness turned into something neither of them could control. The 10 minutes became a ritual. Every Thursday, 9:40, Daniel stayed late and rode the elevator, and Vanessa happened to be in it. They talked. Just talked. About Lily. About her childhood, before the money. About books, about nothing at all. For 10 minutes a week, two people were honest with each other. And it was, Daniel slowly realized, the thing he looked forward to most in his entire week. Without either of them ever saying it, 10 minutes started to feel like nowhere near enough. There was one Thursday Daniel never forgot. Lily had been sick all week, and he'd barely slept, and he almost didn't stay. But he did. And when the elevator opened and Vanessa saw his face, she didn't say a word about 10 minutes or about being a person. She just asked, "What's wrong?" And he told her. And this woman who ran a company worth billions spent the entire ride helping him think it through. A sick kid's fever, whether it was time for the doctor, what he should watch for through the night. Like a friend. Like a normal person on a normal night. At the lobby, she said, "Text me how she's doing. I mean it." And later that night, when Lily's fever finally broke, the first person Daniel wanted to tell wasn't anyone in his family. It was her. That scared him a little. He told her anyway. Here's what nobody warns you about honesty. Once you've been truly seen by someone, going back to being invisible feels unbearable. By the 6th or 7th week, neither of them was really pretending the 10 minutes were about anything but each other. They never crossed a line. He never forgot she was married, and she never once asked him to. But a person can fall for the simple miracle of being listened to, and the two of them were falling, slow and quiet, with nowhere on earth for it to go. Daniel knew it was dangerous. He knew it could cost him everything. He kept showing up anyway. Some Thursdays were the only thing that felt real in his whole week. But here's the thing about gilded cages. Someone is always watching the door. The first sign came 3 weeks in. Daniel's manager called him into a glass office and told him, with a strange tight smile, that his name had come up, that certain people had noticed him, that he might want to be careful about staying late so often. It was nothing you could point to, but the message under the message was clear. Somebody knew. After that, things got strange in small ways. His weekly performance review, always glowing, suddenly came back full of vague complaints he didn't recognize. A project he'd worked on for months got handed to someone else with no explanation. The other analysts, who'd never paid him much mind either way, started giving him a wide berth, the way people do around someone who's been quietly marked. Daniel told himself he was imagining it. He wasn't. The second sign was worse. A man Daniel had never seen sat down across from him in the company cafeteria. Expensive suit. Calm voice. He didn't give a name. He said he worked for Mr. Cole. Mr. Adrian Cole. And he laid a thick envelope on the table between them and said that Mr. Cole was a generous man who valued loyalty, and that all Daniel had to do, to make his life a great deal easier, was tell them what Mrs. Cole talked about on those Thursday nights, where her head was at, what she might be planning. And just like that, the nature of the whole thing changed. This was never going to be about an affair. There wasn't one. This was about a billionaire who controlled his wife the way he controlled everything else, who had cameras and cars and informants, and who had just realized his wife had found the one thing he couldn't monitor: a single honest friend. Daniel wasn't standing between a man and a woman. He was standing between a powerful man and the one possession he refused to lose. Daniel looked at the envelope. He thought about Lily, about the bills, about how one word from Adrian Cole could erase his career, blacklist him across the whole industry, leave his daughter with nothing. All he had to do was take the money and talk. He pushed the envelope back across the table. "I don't have anything to tell you," he said. "We talk about the weather." The man smiled, picked up the envelope, and stood. "Mr. Cole will be disappointed," he said. "He doesn't stay disappointed for long." Daniel knew what was coming. He'd refused a powerful man, and powerful men don't forget. It came on a Thursday. He arrived at work to find his key card wouldn't open the door. A security guard, embarrassed, handed him a box with his things already packed inside it. Terminated. No reason given. None required. 2 years of work, gone between one breath and the next, and there was nothing he could do about it. He stood on the sidewalk outside the Cole Tower with a cardboard box in his arms and Lily's drawing in his pocket, and he understood that he had been made an example of. He didn't tell Lily that night. He couldn't find the words. He made her dinner and read her a story and sat in the dark of his living room after she fell asleep, the cardboard box still by the door, and felt something he hadn't felt since the funeral. The floor dropping out from under him. Everything he'd built, every careful, exhausting, head-down year, erased because he wouldn't sell out a lonely woman's secrets. He thought about all the smart, safe choices he could have made. Take the envelope. Wait for a different elevator that first night. Keep his head down like he always had. And sitting there in the dark, Daniel realized he didn't regret a single one of them. That surprised him most of all. He should have walked away. Any sensible man would have walked away. Instead, Daniel Hayes did the thing the old Daniel, the one from before that elevator, never would have done. He went back in. Not through the front. He still had Vanessa's private number, the one she'd given him on week 4, scribbled on a napkin. He called it. He told her what had happened. And then he told her the rest. All of it. The manager. The envelope. The man in the cafeteria. The offer to inform on her. There was a long silence on the line. He had you fired, she said quietly, for refusing to betray me. It's fine. I'll find something. No. Her voice changed. It was not the whisper from the elevator anymore. It was something harder. Something waking up. No. It is not fine. I have spent 3 years letting that man decide what happens to the people around me. I'm done. What happened next, Daniel only saw a part of. The rest he heard about the way you hear about an earthquake. Vanessa Cole walked into the next board meeting. But she didn't go in quiet, and she didn't go in alone. For 3 years, she had been the controlled one. The figurehead. The wife in the chair. What Adrian and the board had all forgotten was that the figurehead had spent 3 years signing every document, sitting in every meeting, learning where every single body was buried. She knew things. And a woman with nothing left to lose, who suddenly stops being afraid, is the most dangerous thing in any building. She laid it all on the table. Adrian quietly moving company money into his own accounts. The off-book deals. The informants on payroll. She had gathered it slowly, carefully, through all those watched and monitored months, hidden in the one place they never thought to look, because they never once imagined she would fight back. And she told the board, to their faces, with Adrian sitting right there, that all of it was going to the regulators and the press, unless certain things happened. Her freedom, a clean divorce, and the immediate reinstatement, with a full apology, of an analyst named Daniel Hayes. Adrian Cole, for the first time in his life, had no move to make. You cannot control a person who is no longer afraid of losing the thing you hold over them. He had spent years building a cage so perfect he forgot the one thing that keeps anyone inside a cage. They have to believe they can't leave. Daniel had reminded her that she could. And there's a detail Daniel only learned later, that he says is the part he'll never forget. When Vanessa finished laying it all out, when the room was dead silent and Adrian's lawyers were scrambling, she didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice once. She simply stood up, took off the diamond ring, and set it down in the middle of the long table where every man in that room could see it. You can keep this, she told her husband. I was never the thing it was for. And she walked out. By the end of that week it was done. Adrian was quietly forced out, the lawyers already circling. The marriage was over. And Daniel Hayes got a phone call, asking him to please come back to work. With a raise. And an apology from a board that had never apologized to anyone in its life. He took the job back. He needed it. But he didn't take it for them. He took it for a girl named Lily, and a recital, and a crayon drawing in his pocket. Walking back into that tower was the strangest day of Daniel's life. The same people who'd given him a wide berth now nodded and smiled and called him by name. The manager who'd fired him could barely look at him. None of it felt like victory. It just felt like the world tilting slowly back to level after a long time crooked. He went up to his floor, sat down at his old desk, and found Lily's drawing exactly where he'd left it, taped to the side of his monitor. Somehow, in all the chaos, nobody had thrown it away. The first time Daniel saw Vanessa after all of it, she didn't look like a weather system anymore. She looked like a woman who had finally been let out into the sun after a very long time indoors. She stepped down as CEO. She didn't want it. Not the way it had been handed to her. She kept a single seat on the board, just enough to make sure the company was run clean, and she walked away from all the rest. The diamond ring was gone. In its place, nothing. Just a pale band of skin where a cage used to be. They didn't rush anything. That's the part people never believe. After everything, the two of them went slow. Because what had started in that elevator was never about wanting something fast. It was about being seen. And you don't hurry a thing like that. He invited her to Lily's next recital. She sat in the second row, a little behind, like she wasn't quite sure she was allowed to be there. Afterward, Lily marched straight up to her, looked her up and down with the merciless honesty of a 6-year-old, and asked if she was the lady from Daddy's elevator story. Vanessa laughed, that same real laugh from the red-lit box. And she said yes. Yes, she was. Vanessa started showing up more after that. Slowly. Sunday breakfasts that ran long. Helping Lily with the reading she struggled with. The two of them at the kitchen table with their heads bent together. She was clumsy at it at first, out of practice at being a regular person in a regular kitchen. But she learned. You could watch her remember, week by week, who she'd been before they caged her. Daniel didn't fall for the CEO, or the heiress, or the woman the whole building feared. He fell for the one who showed up on Sundays and got pancake batter on her sleeve and laughed about it. Now here's the thing. Months later, Daniel would tell people that the elevator breaking down was the worst luck and the best luck of his whole life, both at the very same time. Because a man can spend years standing right next to someone and never once truly see them. It took a stuck elevator and a dead phone and one honest hour to change two lives. They were married 18 months after that night. A small, quiet ceremony. Lily was the flower girl, and she took the job very seriously. There was no fortune involved. Vanessa had walked away from most of it, and neither of them missed it for a second. They had a small house, and steady work, and a seat in the front row at every single recital. And here's how I know the story is true, the way the best ones always are. There's an elevator in their building now. Just an ordinary one. In an ordinary apartment block. Nothing special about it at all. And every now and then, when they're riding it together, just the two of them, Vanessa will reach over and press the stop button. Just for a minute. Just to stand there, in a stopped elevator, with the man who once showed her a crayon drawing and reminded her she was real. She doesn't beg anymore. She doesn't have to. The one thing she asked a stranger for on the worst night of her life, 10 honest minutes, she gets every single day now. For free. For the rest of her life. The night they met, a woman with everything begged a man with nothing for the one thing all her money could never buy. And he gave it to her. And she gave it right back.